Okay, welcome back to the deep dive, where we take source material that might feel impossibly dense, strip away the noise, and deliver the essential, sometimes surprising, nuggets of knowledge.
And today, we are definitely taking on a challenge. It spans, well, the entire cosmic narrative. We're doing a deep dive into the theological geography of Eden, its garden, and, the ultimate struggle for dominion over the created order.
Sounds huge.
It is. And the sources we've compiled, they aren't just interpreting Genesis casually. They're building this incredibly precise, detailed map of the universe. It connects the beginning, the struggle we're in now, and the final restoration.
That's right. And our listeners shared sources that use, well, it's an intense method, isn't it? This multi-layered theological equivalence.
Yeah, exactly. It means location A is functionally, prophetically identical to location B, which then models concept C, and so on. It's like a chain reaction.
For instance, the original Eden isn't just someplace in the past, it's directly equated with the future kingdom.
So our mission today, really, is to untangle these chains of connection. We need to define the exact nature of that temporary authority. The source is called the proxy rule that was given to the first Adam.
Okay.
Then we need to understand the, frankly, catastrophe of its loss and track how it gets restored through the work of the last Adam. This isn't just like spiritual history. The sources frame it as a geopolitical mandate.
A geopolitical mandate from the dawn of time. Wow. And before we even jump into the map itself, we have to flag these two kind of radical ideas at the core of this whole deep dive.
Right. These are the aha moments, the ones that can really reorient how you think about this stuff.
Okay, first one. The sources actually propose that the place of ultimate bliss, Eden, and the underworld of confinement, Hades, might be the exact same physical location.
Yeah. It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? A paradox.
Yeah.
But if these sources are correct, the difference between paradise and prison isn't geology. It's governance.
Governance.
Who's in charge? What's the quality of the rule established in that specific location?
Yeah.
That's what defines it.
Okay, that's huge. And the second point, which ties right into that.
The Garden of Eden. It was never just, a nice botanical garden.
Right.
It was the absolute geopolitical command center for ruling the entire created earth. It was the Holy of Holies, the actual seat of the law that Adam was supposed to deploy globally.
Wow. Okay. So not just tending plants.
Not even close.
Okay.
And if we can grasp that distinction, that the garden was this nerve center for global power, then we immediately see the stakes of Adam's job were astronomical.
And why his failure wasn't just a personal failing, but a cosmic disaster.
Exactly. It changed everything.
Okay, let's unpack this holy geography then, starting with the terminology, because you mentioned the sources are meticulous about this distinction between, like, the broad territory and the inner sanctum.
Absolutely meticulous. They insist that Eden and the Garden of Eden are not interchangeable. You can't just swap them.
But that's foundational.
Completely foundational to their whole system of thought. Genesis 2:8, it tells us God planted or established the garden in Eden, towards the east. So Eden is the larger territory, the environment, maybe the region.
Okay.
And the garden is the specific, inner, most sacred and crucially controlled space within that larger area.
Got it. Eden, the region, garden, the specific site.
Right. And then the source material takes the word Eden, this larger realm, and links it to this huge number of prophetic and historical concepts. And they all share this quality of being the ultimate domain of God's, joyful rule. Eden actually means joy or delight.
Okay, so it's a comprehensive list. I see it here. It spans time and space. So Eden is equated with the future state, the new heavens and new earth. The Korean is Saihanulgwa Saidang.
Correct. And it's also called paradise.
Yeah.
Nakwan. Cosmically, it's identified with the third heaven, Set Jehanul.
Right. And just to clarify for you listening, these aren't just poetic metaphors in these sources, are they?
No, not at all. When the sources say Eden equals paradise, they mean they are functionally the same restored reality. They're characterized by the unhindered presence of God's rule.
So it connects the physical reality of that pre-fall world to the ultimate spiritual, eternal reality.
Precisely. It bridges the beginning and the end.
And this linkage, it seems to bring the future back into the past as well, because Eden is also seen as equivalent to the 1,000-year kingdom, the Xianyan Wanguk. What's the logic there? Why is the millennial reign the same as original Eden?
Okay, good question. It's because the 1,000-year kingdom represents the recovery of that lost proxy rule we mentioned.
Ah.
It's the time when dominion, the authority lost back in Eden, is finally exercised again by redeemed humanity, but this time under the Son's ultimate authority, right here on Earth.
So it's like a temporary restorative Eden.
That's a great way to put it. It's a restorative Eden before the final eternal state. So functionally, it holds the same definition as the original Eden. It's the realm of God's direct, visible, triumphant governance on earth, restored.
Okay, that makes sense. So if that's the future state, the sources also point to earthly models, right? Things that pointed towards this reality even after the fall.
Yes, exactly. They include the land of Canaan, Canaan, and the sanctuary, Seongso, in this list of equivalents for the broader Eden.
Why Canaan? What's the connection there?
Well, Canaan, the Promised Land, was the specific place where God chose to establish his covenant and his direct presence, first through the tabernacle, then the temple. It was ruled by specific divine law, setting it apart geographically, morally, from all the surrounding nations.
So it acted like a model.
A physical model of paradise on earth. That's exactly how the sources frame it. It was a place where God attempted to establish this rule of light within the surrounding darkness of the fallen world. Therefore, Canaan, the land, is seen as a microcosm of the larger Edenic domain.
It seems like this all boils down to one single overarching concept then.
Pretty much.
Whether we're talking about the pre-fall world, the millennial reign, or the final eternal state, Eden is basically synonymous with the kingdom of God, Hanamuinara. It's the realm where God's will is done perfectly.
That's the core unifying principle. So now that we've established Eden as this massive territory of joy and divine rule, we have to zoom in. We have to focus on the most crucial location within it, the Garden of Eden.
Right. And this isn't just a subdivision. You said it's the engine room.
Exactly. If Eden is the kingdom, the garden is the capital, the control center, the heart.
So what is the garden then, according to these specific definitions? The source equates it with some incredibly high-level sacred locations.
Overwhelmingly specific, yes. The garden is identified as the Holy of Holies. It's also identified with Abraham's bosom, the place of comfort and righteous reception in the afterlife in Luke's gospel.
Okay.
And cosmically, looking forward, it is the New Jerusalem, say Jerusalem sign.
Wow. Holy of Holies, Abraham's bosom, New Jerusalem, that's stacking the deck.
It is. And this identification isn't seen as accidental. What defines the Holy of Holies? There's one primary presence there.
The ark, representing God's presence. The throne.
Exactly. The throne of God. Hananui Bojwaga Inuin God. That's the defining feature.
So this completely transforms the picture of the garden. It's not just a lovely spot with trees, it's a throne room.
A literal throne room. But what was let's say, the operating system of that throne room? It wasn't a physical scepter or a crown Adam was holding.
No. What was it then?
The source is crystal clear. The ultimate expression of that throne, the power emanating from it in the garden, was the commandment, which is the tree of life. Yimyong in Sengmyo Namu.
The commandment is the tree of life, not just next to it.
Is it? The commandment, the law, the word established there was the source of life itself, and it was the mechanism by which the entire created order was meant to function. Obey the commandment, eat from the tree of life, they are presented as essentially the same act.
Okay, hold on. So Adam wasn't just tending shrubs or avoiding one particular fruit tree. He was guarding the ultimate source code for the universe, which was the law of God, embodied as the tree of life.
That's the implication. And this concept, commandment equals tree of life, the source finds powerfully confirmed later in Scripture, specifically Revelation 22.1.
How so?
Well, Revelation describes the river of the water of life flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb. And where is the tree of life? It's on either side of the river. It confirms this identity. The garden, the original Holy of Holies, is the place where life, authority, and divine law originate simultaneously, flowing from the throne.
So if you lost access to the commandment by disobeying it,
you lost access to life. And you lost the authority that came with upholding that commandment. They're intrinsically linked.
This raises a really fascinating crux question then about the connection between the physical and the spiritual. If the real garden, the ultimate Holy of Holies, is in heaven, how does that relate to the earthly garden that Adam actually walked in?
Yeah, that's a key point. This is where the source uses Hebrews 8.5 to anchor its cosmology.
What is Hebrews?
It reminds us that the priests on earth serve at a sanctuary that is just a copy and shadow moyungwa jerimja of what is in heaven. So every earthly sanctuary, the tabernacle Moses built, the temple Solomon built, was merely a model, a blueprint, a physical representation of the actual ultimate structure in heaven.
Okay, so the earthly garden was like the prototype.
Exactly. The prototype of the Heavenly Command Center, but placed physically on earth. It was the designated point of contact, the embassy, if you will.
Which brings us right back to our geographical models. If Canaan modeled the broader Eden, or paradise,
Right.
then the control center, the garden, the Holy of Holies function must be modeled by the core of Canaan, which would be
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Precisely. Jerusalem, the city, eventually contained the earthly sanctuary, and within that, the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized the commandments, the law. The source even points to Zechariah 8.3, describing Jerusalem as the city of truth, Jinri Seong,
The city of truth.
meaning the location itself was designated as the seat of the commandment, replicating the function of the original garden. So we're talking about this mandated connection. The physical location of the garden, likely near future Jerusalem, became the most contested spiritual real estate on the planet.
Because it mirrored the stakes of the original setup in creation.
Exactly. It was ground zero. Hashtag 2. Locating the cosmic battleground. Eden versus Hades.
Okay, so we've mapped the internal structure. Eden the kingdom, garden the capital, the throne room powered by the commandment tree of life. Now we have to locate this whole apparatus in the cosmos. And this section, this feels like maybe the most radical part of the sources.
It definitely pushes the boundaries of traditional thinking because it deals directly with the spatial relationship between light and darkness, between God's realm and the place of confinement.
So we're moving beyond history now into the high-level cosmic architecture as these sources understand it.
That's right. We start with the actual sanctuary, the ultimate location of the throne, which is in heaven. But the question is, where is heaven situated in relation to the earth and everything else?
And the sources go back to Genesis for this.
Genesis 1.7. It describes God making the firmament, the expanse, and separating the waters above the firmament from the waters below the firmament. Heaven, the dwelling place of God, is situated above those upper waters. Gengshang Wei Wei Mu.
Okay, waters above the sky.
That celestial water, that great barrier, is the crucial dividing line in this cosmology. And the sources make an immediate connection to the book of Revelation, chapter 4, verse 6. They call this the glass sea, Yuribada.
The glass sea before the throne.
Yes. A reflective barrier, perhaps signifying purity, holiness, separation, that sits before the very throne of God. This barrier is seen as both physical and spiritual.
Okay, so if heaven is above this glass sea barrier, where does the source locate the domain of darkness? Where's Hades?
The sources place Hades, Hadusi, the realm of confinement for the dead and potentially fallen spiritual beings, below the glass sea.
Below it.
Below it. Hades, in this view, is physically contained or perhaps surrounded by these upper waters. It's like the sealed-off lower level, or maybe even a realm within the waters below the firmament, depending on interpretation, but definitely beneath that heavenly barrier.
Okay, that clarifies Hades as a location of confinement, spatially separated from heaven. But wait, this immediately creates a major geographical paradox, doesn't it?
Oh, you see it. Yes.
Which leads us straight to the core of the source's really shocking claim. Genesis clearly places Eden on Earth. It mentions known rivers like the Tigris and Euphrates. Cain settles east of Eden. It seems terrestrial.
It does.
Yet if Hades is also somehow located on or beneath the Earth, contained under that glass sea, what's the spatial relationship between Eden and Hades?
This is the central geographical wrestling match the sources undertake. They pose the question directly. If Hades is the dark domain, the place where Satan is ultimately confined or has influence, and Eden is the domain of light, God's rule, established on earth, and if both somehow exist in the same terrestrial vicinity, then the only logical conclusion, according to these sources, is that Eden and Hades might actually be the same physical location.
Wow. Okay, I have to push back on that for a second. That is so counterintuitive to every picture we have, fiery hell down below, beautiful garden up here, completely separate. How can the domain of light and the domain of darkness literally occupy the same piece of cosmic real estate?
Right. It sounds impossible. But this is where the source material does something brilliant. It completely redefines what place means in this context. The difference, they argue, is not the spatial location, it's the governance, the tangqi.
Governance again. Okay, explain that.
Eden is defined as the light domain, Bit-Ouyung-Yok. It was placed deliberately within the larger physical container of the earth. But the earth itself, in its fallen potential or underlying nature, is also the realm designated as Hades, the domain where Satan is confined or exerts his influence.
Whoa. Okay. Let me see if I get this. The physical planet Earth was potentially designated as Hades, like a realm intended to confine darkness and sin. But God placed the garden, the commandment, this source of light, as a beacon and a control mechanism inside that confinement zone.
That's the idea precisely. Think of the commandment, the law of love and truth that Adam was meant to uphold in the garden, as a kind of divine suppressor field.
Okay.
If Adam obeyed, the domain of light emanating from the garden would suppress the darkness associated with Hades, forcing it to remain passive, latent. The earth would then be experienced as Eden, a place of joy.
But conversely, if Adam failed,
The suppressor field collapses. The light flickers out, so to speak, and the earth defaults to its underlying nature or potential Hades, a place defined by suffering, struggle, the curse, death. The rule of darkness asserts itself.
so the Earth becomes this cosmic flashpoint. It's like an inhabited prison where the warden, Adam, was given the key, the commandment, to keep the inmates subdued.
That's a very good analogy. And his failure wasn't just letting one inmate escape. It changed the entire nature of the prison yard. The physical location, Earth, remained the same, but its experiential nature, its operating system flipped. It went from Eden, joy, to Hades, suffering, confinement.
That connects the micro act of disobedience in the garden to a macrocosmic transformation of the planet's very nature.
Yes, it wasn't about geography changing, but about the law governing the place changing.
And if we bring this back down to the specific earthly possibility, the sources lean towards Eden being that specific region modeled by the Promised Land.
Canaan, yes. That's the geographical extrapolation they make.
So if Eden was Canaan, the model paradise, then the specific command center, the garden, the Holy of Holies function, was likely modeled by or located at Jerusalem.
That follows the logic. Jerusalem, therefore, wasn't just a random city. It was potentially the original specific location on Earth where this proxy rule of light was meant to be executed, even while the potential darkness of Hades lay confined, as it were, beneath its very foundations.
This gives a truly monumental significance to that geographical region, Canaan and Jerusalem. It wasn't just a promise to Abraham about land, it was the designated command center in the ongoing cosmic war against darkness.
The location itself was the key. The key to unlocking the Earth's potential as Eden, or confining it to its nature as Hades. The stakes were absolutely universal, even if the boundary of Adam's initial operational area, the garden, might have been relatively small.
Okay, this entire discussion, this whole cosmic map, it really hinges on the specific authority Adam was given in that garden command center. Let's drill down into that. Genesis 2.15 says he was placed there to work it and take care of it or manage and keep it. But how extensive was that mandate, really?
Yeah, work it and keep it sounds a bit like cosmic gardening. But the source material is adamant. Adam's job was vastly more significant than that. He was given the proxy rule. The Deri Tung Shi Quan.
Proxy rule, that term is crucial.
Yes, really crucial. It means delegated authority, acting on behalf of a greater power. He wasn't the honor. He was the manager, the viceroy, representing God.
Okay, so he's God's viceroy. How far did that proxy rule extend? Was it just limited to the physical boundaries of the Garden of Eden?
No, absolutely not. That's a key conclusion in these sources. The authority granted to Adam, exercised from the garden, was intended to reach over the entire earth.
The entire earth.
Yes. The sources use phrases like Chionha Mduki Michidian Guans, the authority that reached or extended over all the kingdoms under heaven. The garden was the office, the command center, yes, but the jurisdiction was global.
Wow. So Adam was meant to rule the world from Jerusalem, or the place that would become Jerusalem, the garden. And his tool for administration was the commandment, the law of love and truth.
Exactly. That was the intended operating system for the planet. If he succeeded, the domain of light, governed by this law, would expand, suppress the latent darkness of Hades, and essentially transform the entire earth into Eden.
That was the plan. To demonstrate that divine rule, mediated through a pure human agent operating under the commandment, could govern the whole created order justly and effectively, even within this contested space.
That was the goal, a perfect demonstration.
It didn't happen. The authority was lost. And this is where the source material introduces a really interesting theological debate, actually. It's about who exactly received that lost power. There seem to be two main views presented.
That's right. There's the traditional view, and then a more nuanced alternative view that the sources explore.
Okay, let's start with the more common understanding. What happens when Adam fails? Who gets the power?
The standard interpretation, often supported by passages like Luke 4, where Satan offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world because it has been delivered to me.
Right, implying he got it from Adam.
Exactly. This view holds that when Adam disobeyed, he forfeited the proxy rule directly to Satan. Satan then became the temporary holder of that global dominion, the god of this age, claiming power over all the kingdoms under heaven.
So in this view, Satan is the active geopolitical ruler of the fallen world system.
Correct. He's the one pulling the strings.
Okay, that's the traditional view. Adam fails, Satan takes over the lease, so to speak. But the sources challenge that, or at least offer a fascinating alternative. What's the distinction they make about who really received the power?
The alternative theory, which the sources seem to find compelling, suggests that Adam didn't lose the rule directly to Satan, but rather he lost it to sin itself.
Joe, to sin. As an entity or principle?
Or as a governing principle or power. By violating the commandment, Adam immediately became, in the language of Romans, a slave of sin.
Ah, okay.
This implies that sin, the principle of rebellion against God's law, is the true governing force in the fallen world. And Satan, in this view, is simply the most powerful instrument or manifestation of that principle of sin. He wields the power that sin holds over humanity.
That's a fundamental distinction. It's subtle but significant. If sin is the ultimate master, not just Satan.
Right. Then the core issue isn't just dethroning a specific fallen angel, Satan, but eradicating the principle of sin that governs humanity's acts, desires, and structures.
So what practical difference does this distinction make in the source's overall theology? How does it change things?
It potentially changes the focus of redemption. If Satan is the primary ruler who stole the authority, then redemption might look more like a primarily judicial or power transaction, defeating Satan, taking back the authority, like a cosmic legal battle.
Okay.
But if sin is the ruler and humanity is enslaved to it, then redemption must first involve showing humanity how to actually live outside of sin's governance, breaking the power of sin in human experience.
Or explain something you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. This is why the sources heavily emphasize the last Adam, Jesus, coming not just as a sacrifice to pay a penalty, but crucially as an example. Bonol boyu shasinda, showing the pattern.
An example of what?
Of human life lived completely free from being a slave of sin. He demonstrated that it was possible for humanity, empowered by God, to live under the commandment, thereby breaking the hold of sin.
So defeating sin required demonstrating victory over it in human flesh.
That seems to be the perspective, yes.
Okay. But regardless of who temporarily holds the reins, whether it's Satan directly or sin as the governing principle with Satan as its agent, the sources offer a critical anchor point about ultimate ownership, right?
Yes, absolutely critical. This is non-negotiable within the source material we reviewed. No matter who gained the temporary proxy rule, the earth and all creation, Pijoji, never stopped being God's ultimate property.
God never lost the title deed.
Never. Psalm 50, Psalm 115, they're clear. The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man. Given, not sold. The failure of the first administrator, Adam, was a breach of his management contract, a default on the lease, you could say. It wasn't a transfer of the ownership deed.
So God retained the ultimate legal right to intervene, to foreclose, and to restore the property according to his own timing and plan.
Exactly. The ownership was never truly in question, only the management.
And the immediate consequence of that failed management, that loss of the commandment's rule, was the transformation of the Earth's operating system. The law of love was out, replaced by something much darker.
Yes. The world immediately devolved into what the sources vividly call the strong oppressing the weak. The Korean phrase is yakyuk gangsik. It literally means the weak are meat, the strong eat.
Law of the jungle.
Precisely. The rule of predation, where force, not divine law or love, determines outcomes. It's not just a moral decline in individuals. The sources see it as the fundamental operating principle of the entire fallen global geopolitical system. Power dictates justice, or injustice.
This concept, yakyuk gangsik, feels really central. It's the direct inverse of the intended Edenic state, where presumably the strong would protect the weak under God's law.
Completely inverse. And the source material uses scriptural examples to illustrate this new, brutal rule of force.
Like what?
Well, they contrast the intended peace Isaiah's vision, where the wolf lives with the lamb, with the immediate post-fall reality. They point to passages like Ecclesiastes 4.1, Solomon lamenting the tears of the oppressed who have no comforter because power was on the side of their oppressors.
So, Adam's failure to rule by the commandment directly unleashed this system of systemic injustice enforced by human power, maybe manipulated by satanic power, all under the umbrella of sin's dominion.
That's the chain reaction described. The failure at the top, in the command center, allowed the inherent darkness, the Yak-Yak Gangsik principle latent in the Hades aspect of Earth, to assert itself and transform the planet into a place governed by the law of the jungle.
Okay, so Adam's failure was the critical switch that flipped the Earth from Eden mode to Hades mode.
Exactly. And the sources add a fascinating hypothetical. Had Adam succeeded, had he kept the commandment and guarded Eden,
Yes.
then the domain of light, governed by love and truth, would theoretically have expanded universally. This success would have definitively proven Satan a liar about God's nature and his law.
Okay, proving Satan wrong. What else?
Critically, it would have established the perfect moral and legal foundation for God to then justly judge all creation under that successful demonstrated commandment. But the proving ground failed. The experiment was aborted by Adam's choice. #4, restoration and the future of dominion.
Okay, so Adam's failure meant the original blueprint for governing creation effectively stalled. It had to be restarted or perhaps fulfilled in a different way. This leads us directly to the role of the last Adam, Jesus, and the whole future structure of redeemed rule.
Exactly. The narrative moves from failure to restoration. The last Adam, the Son, came to succeed where the first Adam failed. The sources highlight John 5:43, he came in the Father's name with the Father's authority. And through his life, death, and resurrection, he secured the right to inherit the created order, as Philippians 2:9 suggests, receiving the name above all names.
And his primary purpose, connecting back to the sin versus Satan debate, was to redeem humanity from
the bondage to sin that the first Adam's failure had imposed on everyone, freeing us from being Joey-Jong, slaves of sin.
Right. And as we discussed, this redemption, according to these sources, required him to be more than just a sacrifice. He had to be a perfect administrator, a perfect example.
Yes, he had to serve as the example, the bon, the pattern, demonstrating a human life lived entirely without sin, proving that humanity, united with God, could actually fulfill the commandment, could live outside sin's dominion.
So his perfect life wasn't just personal, it was a representative victory.
A representative victory that broke the legal and spiritual hold of sin. This allowed, as 1 Peter 2:21 suggests, the first Adam's descendants, humanity, to potentially escape that slavery by following his example, empowered by his spirit. He was a successful redemonstration of the Dari Tungshiguan, the proxy rule, lived out perfectly in human form.
Okay, so the last Adam succeeds, demonstrates the way. What's the ultimate political consequence of this redemption? How is the lost proxy rule actually recovered and implemented?
This is where the sources tie everything directly to the 1,000-year kingdom, the millennium. They see this period as the literal restoration and execution of the recovered governance. It is Eden, functionally restored for that period.
And how does that work? Who gets the authority back?
The authority lost by the one man, Adam, is granted back to redeemed humanity. Specifically, those who participate in the first revelation calls them king priests. They receive back the proxy rule over the earth.
They get the Darhu Tongshiguan.
Yes, but this time, it's permanently secured under the supreme ultimate authority of the Son, the last Adam. Revelation 20.6 is key here. They will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him for 1,000 years.
Reign with him. This sounds less like just a peaceful theological rest period and more like, well, you called it a geopolitical mandate earlier. It sounds like a massive administrative cleanup operation.
That's very much how the sources portray it. The function of these king priests during the 1,000 years is twofold: reign and purification.
Okay, reign and purification. What does that involve?
Reigning means administering the world according to the original standard, the commandment, the law of God, reestablishing the rule of light globally. Purification means actively assisting the Son in the crucial work of eliminating sin and its effects from the creation, both physically and spiritually.
So they're enforcing the restored law on a planet that's been saturated by Yakik Gangsik, the law of the jungle, for millennia.
Exactly. It's the implementation phase of the victory won by Christ, rolling back the consequences of the fall, preparing for the eternal state.
And where is this recovered rule centered? If the garden was the original command post, where's the capital now?
Going back to our initial definitions, the command post, the Holy of Holies, is relocated, or perhaps fully manifested, as the New Jerusalem.
The New Jerusalem.
Yes, just as the garden was the original Holy of Holies and earthly Jerusalem was its model, the New Jerusalem descends, Revelation 21, and becomes the established eternal capital of the created order, certainly during the 1,000 years and likely beyond.
So Revelation 20.4, where it says, thrones were set up and judgment was given to those seated on them. That's the king priests reigning from the New Jerusalem.
That's the interpretation presented. It represents the complete recovery and recentering of the geopolitical authority that was lost way back in the fall in the garden.
Okay. And this 1,000-year period, this restorative Eden, it eventually transitions into the ultimate final state. The new heavens and new earth. Saihanagwas Saidazang.
Correct. And the source confirms, citing Revelation 21.1, that this final reality is paradise restored, the ultimate Eden.
And what defines this final paradise? How is it different from the 1,000-year kingdom?
Fundamentally, it's defined by the complete and utter resolution of the Eden-Hades conflict. It's characterized by the total absence of sin and the final removal of the old darkness and its source.
So Satan is dealt with finally after the 1,000 years.
Yes, the sources point out that Satan is bound during the 1,000-year reign. Revelation 20.2, meaning the rule of force, the Yakyuk Gangsik, is fully suppressed. But then he's released for a final rebellion, which is crushed, leading to the final judgment and his removal. This allows the new heavens and new earth to be a creation where only the commandment, the law of love, holds sway eternally.
Got it. The narrative seems to close with this really powerful image of this fully restored dominion in Revelation 21.24. It says, "The kings of the earth, Tanawi Wangdol, bring their glory and honor into the New Jerusalem." What's the significance of that act?
It's hugely significant. It signifies the successful establishment and operation of the global proxy rule under the sun. The world is once again governed from the Holy of Holies in New Jerusalem.
Just like Adam was meant to govern from the garden.
Exactly. The redeemed kings, presumably ruling over redeemed nations or peoples, bring the fruits of their righteous administration, their glory, back to the divine capital. It shows the original geopolitical mandate to rule the earth by the commandment has finally eternally been fulfilled.
Wow. So the entire sweep of cosmic history, according to these sources, is really a story about establishing, losing, and then permanently recovering a single, universal proxy authority.
An authority which is always anchored in the presence and application of God's law, the commandment operating from the designated center of creation, whether that's the garden or the New Jerusalem.
Okay, so we've tracked this concept of divine authority and its location from the third heaven, down through the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, paradoxically into the darkness of Hades residing on earth, and then ultimately back to the future glory of the New Jerusalem. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And it fundamentally reframes the garden.
The ultimate finding, it seems, from the source material is crystal clear. The Garden of Eden wasn't just paradise lost, it was the geopolitical center of the pre-fall earth. It was the seat of the law, the commandment that granted Adam global dominion.
That's the core takeaway.
But let's circle back to one of the most challenging analytical points you raised from the sources. This idea that the scope of Adam's initial power, whether it was truly global or maybe just confined to Eden initially, ultimately didn't matter that much for God's bigger plan. That feels counterintuitive again.
It does, initially.
Yeah.
The sources raise this almost as a philosophical necessity, acknowledging the debate. Was Adam's jurisdiction instantly Chiona Manguk, all kingdoms under heaven,
Right.
or was it just confined to Eden with the potential to expand?
Right.
The source argues, quite profoundly I think, that even if his direct rule was limited only to the garden itself, his failure or success there was entirely sufficient to achieve God's ultimate purpose in setting up the scenario in the first place.
Why? Why would success or failure in just that small, localized area be enough? Enough to justify the subsequent massive cosmic transformation and the eventual judgment of all creation?
It comes down to pure legal demonstration of truth, the proving of the commandment's validity. Think about the setup. The commandment was presented as perfect. Adam was created perfect, or at least innocent and capable. He was placed in a perfect environment, the garden within Eden. Ideal conditions.
Right. The best possible starting point.
Exactly. Now, if Adam had succeeded under those perfect conditions, if he had kept the commandment,
Yes.
it would have eternally established two crucial things. One, the absolute validity and goodness of God's law. It could be kept. It did lead to life. And two, Satan's core accusation that God's law was too strict, arbitrary, or impossible for creation to follow would have been definitively proven false right then and there.
Okay. So Adam's success would have vindicated God's law perfectly.
Perfectly. And that successful demonstration, even in that small, pristine environment, would have been sufficient legal grounds for God to judge every subsequent act of disobedience across the entire universe against that proven perfect standard.
I see. The precedent would be set.
The precedent would be irrefutably set. But he failed. And that failure, the failure of the first perfect man and the perfect control center under the perfect law, that also served God's purpose.
How did the failure serve the purpose?
Because it demonstrated the truth from the other side. It proved the law was indeed perfect, But it also proved that humanity in its initial created state could not ultimately uphold it on its own without divine intervention and empowerment. It revealed the need for something more.
The need for grace. The need for the last Adam.
Exactly. Adam's failure, tragically, served the ultimate purpose of justifying God's plan for redemption through the Son. It established the legal and moral necessity for the last Adam to come, not just to pay for the failure, but to fulfill the law perfectly as a human and then empower others to do the same.
This seems to suggest a really profound, almost unsettling theological reality, that God knew the first Adam would fail.
The sources strongly imply that yes, that the entire plan, the structure of creation and redemption, was architected around the foreknowledge of Adam's failure.
So the purpose of the first Adam wasn't necessarily to succeed, but to set the stage.
To set the stage, yes. To demonstrate the absolute truth and perfection of the law, and simultaneously humanity's desperate need for redemption and divine enablement to live according to it. The first Adam initiated the story. The last Adam was always destined to come and complete the creation, establishing the eternal governance that could never fail.
So the entire Edenic setup, the garden, the commandment, the tree, the choice, was a kind of temporary, necessary experiment.
A divine experiment, if you like, designed to establish the irrefutable moral and legal grounds for the eternal kingdom that would follow, whether through Adam's obedience or, as it happened, through the Son's redemption.
Wow. So the battleground was set up not just for Adam's potential victory, but as a guaranteed demonstration of the truth about the commandment. A truth that required either Adam's impossible obedience or the Son's necessary redemption.
And that experiment, through its failure, proved that life, joy, light Eden can only flow from adherence to the commandment, to God's will. And without that adherence, the world, by default, falls under the rule of darkness, suffering, and predation. Hades, Yakyok Gangsik.
The whole structure garden as Holy of Holies, commandment as the power source, Hades confined within the same space, was designed to prove the absolute necessity of the rule of light, ultimately fulfilled by Christ.
That's the synthesis the sources arrive at.
Well, this deep dive has certainly fundamentally reshaped my picture of biblical geography. It's far more dynamic and contested than just locations on a map.
Absolutely.
We've established, based on these sources, that the physical location of Earth was this incredibly contested real estate, potentially simultaneously Eden and Hades. And the garden wasn't just a starting point, it was the command center.
A command center whose failure led to a global shift, not in geography, but in governance, from light to darkness.
And we've seen that the ultimate struggle wasn't really about controlling land, but about the method of rule. It was the commandment versus the rule of force, love versus predation, resulting in that catastrophic geopolitical transfer of power, whether to Satan or sin, that transformed Earth's operating system into one of suffering.
Understanding that transformation is key to understanding the goal of restoration.
Thank you so much for walking us through this. It's been incredibly dense, but also really illuminating. And thanks to you, the listener, for joining us as we explored this radical interpretation of the created order and the purpose of that original proxy rule.
Our analysis today really shows that to understand the kingdom of God, you arguably have to first understand the original political mandate of the Garden of Eden. It sets the stage for everything that follows.
Right. Now for you, the learner, something to take away and mull over. Based on everything we've discussed, if the first Adam's success would have resulted in a world governed by the commandment, by love, truth, justice, and his failure resulted in a world governed by power and predation, the Yakyuk Gangsik, ask yourself this profound question.
Look around today. Look at the institutions, the systems that govern our societies, whether they're political, social, economic, even interpersonal. Which systems, which ways of operating seem to reflect that original mandate given in Eden, genuinely seeking rule by love, truth, and the protection of the weak?
And conversely, what systems, what attitudes, what power dynamics still reflect the rule that took its place after the fall? The rule of the strong feeding on the weak, the pervasive, often subtle legacy of that failed proxy rule. Where do we see Eden trying to break through, and where do we still see Hades holding sway?
It's a challenging question to apply.
It really is something to think about. Until next time, keep digging.